Do you know the 12 items becoming scarce that were just announced? Do not disappear the way you think. You do not lack food. You still go to the supermarket, and everything still looks normal. But something is disappearing that you cannot see. It is the ability to buy familiar items without thinking. In the past 6 to 12 months, prices of many items have increased by 30 to 60%. But what matters is, you still buy them every day. No empty shelves, no panic, just a system tightening, making you pay more to get less, and gradually lose the choice you once thought was guaranteed. And pay close attention to item number 7, because when it starts to become unstable, it is often the clearest sign that everything else will not be the same anymore. 12. Sugar is not scarce. Only your ability to afford it is declining. No one thinks sugar is a problem. Over the past 12 months, sugar prices have increased by more than 8%, and that is only what you see on the label. It still sits on the shelf, familiar to the point you barely notice it. Something cheap, easy to buy, and seemingly always available. But then one day, you stand in front of the shelf and hesitate. Not because it is gone, but because you start to think, do I need to buy as much as before? Prices rise, promotions disappear, packages shrink without you noticing. Nothing disappears loudly. It changes quietly, little by little, and you adapt in a very natural way. Cut back slightly, buy less, use more carefully. One person said it simply, "The biggest shortage I am facing is a shortage of money." It sounds simple, but that is the core of the problem. This is not a story about running out of sugar. It is about gradually losing the comfort of buying it. Not because sugarcane is scarce, but because everything around it is getting more expensive. Higher energy costs make factories more costly to run. Rising transportation costs make every shipment more expensive, and labor is no longer as cheap as before. When costs increase at every link, the price you see at the end is just the result. And the dangerous part is, you do not realize it is happening. Sugar is an ingredient in hundreds of products you buy every week, from bread, soft drinks, to packaged foods. When sugar prices rise, your entire basket rises with it, even if you do not change your habits. You will never see empty shelves. You will only see smaller packages, higher prices, and fewer promotions. You do not stop buying sugar. You are just quietly using less, without noticing. That is how real scarcity begins. Not by running out, but by forcing you to think every time you put it in your cart. The smart solution is not to stockpile more sugar. Instead, look at what you consume every day. Most sugar does not come from the jar in your kitchen, but from processed foods, things you barely notice. Just reducing 30 to 40% of those items can cut a large part of your dependency without drastically changing your habits. You do not need to buy less sugar. You just need to understand where you are using it. And when you reduce that hidden sugar, you are already ahead of the market. 11. Canned goods, the shelves are still full. But the cost behind them has completely changed. You still see full shelves, but the cost behind them has completely changed. At a glance, everything looks fine. Products are still lined up, no sense of shortage. But if you try to find the exact item you buy every week, you will start to notice something is no longer the same. The problem is not the food itself, but what you cannot see. Aluminum for cans is more expensive because electricity costs have risen. CO2 used for preservation and production processes is disrupted due to reduced industrial output. Energy for manufacturing, packaging, and transportation has increased at every stage. No single factor causes scarcity, but when all of them happen at once, the entire system begins to contract. Manufacturers do not disappear. They do not stop. They just adjust. Fewer versions, fewer flavors, fewer choices. And what many people do not notice is this. You do not realize you are adapting to scarcity. There is no warning, no empty shelves, just small changes that make you spend more time. Think longer every time you buy. One person said it clearly. I do not see a shortage of canned goods. I just cannot find what I usually buy anymore. That is the strangest feeling. You can still buy food, but not the type you trust, not the brand you know, not the flavor you are used to. You do not lose food. You lose certainty. When you have to read labels more carefully, compare more before choosing, that is when the system has already changed. And here is something few people say. Modern scarcity does not make you panic. It makes you lose direction. A more effective approach is to change how you prepare. Do not stockpile by brand, stockpile by function. Canned fish is still protein. Beans are still nutrition. Canned meat is still a meal. A flexible person can substitute in seconds. A dependent person hesitates longer each time. The difference is not in how much you have, but in how well you adapt. The first thing to disappear is not the product, but the familiarity that makes you feel secure when buying it. Because when you have to search for something familiar, it may already be gone. When you can no longer find the brand you are used to, that is not the problem. The problem is whether you are ready to switch immediately, or whether you need a few extra seconds to adapt. 10. Coffee. It is not that coffee is scarce. It is that your habit is becoming more expensive. Coffee prices have increased by 60%. But what is concerning is, you are still paying without changing anything. You still drink coffee every morning. Everything continues as usual. But if you pay close attention, you will notice something very small. You no longer feel like you can buy it without thinking. No shock, no panic. Just prices rising, slowly, steadily, and not coming back down. The cause is not simple. Coffee is one of the crops most sensitive to climate. A temperature increase of just 1 to 2 degrees, shifts in rainfall, or unexpected frost in regions like Brazil can significantly reduce output. And the key point is, coffee cannot recover quickly. One failed season can affect supply for years. When output drops, costs begin to accumulate. Harvesting becomes harder. Transportation becomes more expensive. Roasters adjust supply. And all of this does not create visible scarcity. It creates a sustained pressure, where prices rise but no one reacts immediately. But the real impact is not in the market. It is in you. You do not quit coffee. You do not cut back. You do not look for alternatives. You just accept it. A little more each day. A little more each purchase. And before you realize it, the cost of a small habit has increased significantly while you continue as before. Coffee is not something you simply buy. It is something you do not easily give up. It is not just a drink. It is how you start your day, a break, a part of normalcy you want to keep, even when everything else is changing. And that is why coffee becomes one of the easiest items to be pushed up in price, without creating a strong reaction from buyers. A more practical approach is not long-term stockpiling. Coffee loses flavor quickly. Instead, buy in short cycles. You do not need to give up coffee. You just need to buy it more intelligently. Getting ahead of the market by a few weeks can sometimes be enough to keep a habit without paying more. If the cost of your morning coffee doubles, Will you continue as usual, or will it be the first time you reconsider a habit that once felt impossible to replace? 9. Chocolate. It is not that chocolate is scarce. It is that the raw material is weakening at the source. Cocoa prices have risen sharply over the past 2 years. But you will not see chocolate disappear. The shelves are still full. The brands are still familiar. But if you look more closely, you will notice something subtle. The experience has changed. You take a bite and pause a little longer. Not bad, but not as rich as before. Less cocoa, the part that defines the true value of chocolate. Sweeter, and missing the depth you once knew. The cause is not you. The cause is supply. More than 60% of the world's cocoa comes from West Africa, a region under pressure from rising temperatures, irregular rainfall, depleted soil, and spreading disease. When cocoa trees are stressed, they do not just produce less, the quality of the beans also declines significantly. This is the real issue, not just lower output, but weaker raw material from within. When cocoa quality declines, manufacturers do not raise prices immediately. They adjust the formula. Less cocoa, more sugar, added substitutes to keep prices stable, and it all happens quietly. No announcement, no warning. Just a gradual shift in taste until you get used to a different version without realizing it. What few people talk about is, you are gradually getting used to an inferior version without noticing. Chocolate is not just a snack. It provides quick energy, supports focus through mild caffeine and natural compounds in cocoa. Dark chocolate also contains antioxidants that support heart health. And when cocoa declines, those benefits decline as well. You do not see chocolate disappear. You see its value decline. A simple approach is to choose chocolate with 70% cocoa or higher, where it is harder for manufacturers to dilute quality. You do not need to buy a lot, just choose correctly. The issue is not whether chocolate is still available. It is that you are consuming a lower value version without realizing it. Because when quality declines long enough, it becomes the new standard. If one day the chocolate you eat no longer tastes the same, will you think your taste has changed, or that the product itself has quietly changed from within? 8. Oranges and orange juice. It is not that oranges are scarce. It is that the orange trees are weakening at the source. Florida has lost more than half of its orange production, yet you still see orange juice on the shelves. That is what makes this issue dangerous. If the shelves were empty, everyone would recognize a crisis. But when the bottles are still there, everything looks normal. You do not think anything is wrong. The problem is not demand, it is the trees themselves. Citrus greening disease does not kill the tree immediately. It weakens it from within. The tree still lives, still produces fruit. But the fruit is smaller, has less juice, tastes weaker, and yields decline year after year. What few people say is, the trees are still there, but no longer strong enough to produce what you once knew. This is the key difference. A storm can destroy one season, but citrus greening damages the entire system. It lives in the roots, in the nutrient pathways, in the tree's ability to absorb. You cannot fix it in a single season. An orchard can take years to recover, if it recovers at all. When the source weakens, the market begins to adjust, not by stopping sales, but by changing the product. Orange juice can be blended from multiple sources. Flavor is adjusted to maintain familiarity. Prices rise, volume shrinks, but you do not see a clear change. You take a sip, and it feels slightly weaker, but hard to explain why. You do not see a shortage of orange juice. You are drinking a version stretched from multiple sources. Oranges are not just a fruit. For many people, especially older adults, they are a familiar source of vitamin C, supporting immunity and part of a morning routine. But when fruit becomes smaller, contains less juice and declines in quality, nutritional value declines as well. A more practical approach is not to rely on a single source. Rotate vitamin C sources, fresh seasonal oranges, frozen fruit, or other options like kiwi, berries, and bell peppers. Not to replace oranges, but to avoid dependence on a weakening system. Because when the source is weakening, the product on the shelf is only the final stage you see. If one day your morning glass of orange juice no longer tastes the same, will you think your taste has changed, or that the entire orchard behind it has quietly declined? 7. Eggs, the smallest item, but the fastest signal of a system losing stability. Egg prices have at times risen more than 50% in just a few months. Tens of millions of chickens have been culled due to avian flu, and many farms have been forced to reduce flocks as feed and transportation costs continue to rise. But what is notable is, you still buy eggs every week as if nothing has changed. Until one day, you stand in front of the shelf longer than usual, not because they are gone, but because for the first time, you are no longer sure you are choosing the same thing as before. The familiar carton is gone. The price is not what you remember. There are cheaper options, but you no longer trust them the same way. Eggs are not scarce, but the system that creates their stability is weakening. This is what makes eggs different from most other foods. You can switch types of bread, you can change canned brands, but with eggs, you almost never think about replacing them. You use them for breakfast, when you do not know what to cook, to rescue a meal when everything else is not ready. And because of that, when eggs start to become unstable, you feel it more clearly than anything else. One person said it honestly, "I still buy eggs, but I no longer buy them comfortably." That is not a shortage. That is the loss of certainty. If you want to stay ahead, you do not need to stockpile excessively. You just need to maintain your own stability. When buying, do not just look at the price. Choose cartons that are fresher, with longer expiration dates, and quickly check freshness. Eggs that feel heavier and have less movement inside are better. Do not store eggs on the refrigerator door because the temperature fluctuates constantly there. Place them deeper inside to extend their usability by a few extra days that many people overlook. If you buy more than usual, do not keep everything in whole form. You can crack the eggs, lightly beat them, then portion and freeze enough for one meal. And when needed, simply thaw them in the refrigerator overnight. Simple, but helps you avoid depending on frequent supermarket trips. And one important point many people overlook: do not let eggs be the only protein source in your mind. Beans, canned fish, or other options are not to fully replace them, but to ensure you always have alternatives when a familiar item starts to become unpredictable. Because in the end, the issue is not whether you can buy eggs or not, but when you stand in front of the shelf, can you still choose quickly as before? Or do you start to think longer about things that used to be simple? 6. Corn, it is not about corn. It is the hidden fuel running the entire system. You do not eat corn every day. But most of what you eat starts with corn. In history, corn was not just food. For the Maya and Aztec, it was the foundation of life. They did not just grow corn, they lived on it, turning it into bread, porridge, and drinks. Corn did not just feed people, it shaped an entire civilization. Today, you no longer see corn that way. You do not see it on your plate. You see meat, you see eggs, you see milk, but behind all of it is still the same raw material. Corn is not something you eat, It is the fuel that runs the entire food system. Most industrial livestock depends on corn as the primary feed. That makes corn a unique input. When it changes, everything behind it does not disappear. It begins to shift. In the United States, most corn is grown in the Midwest. When drought persists, temperatures rise, or fertilizer costs increase sharply. Production does not collapse immediately, but it weakens. And when the input weakens, feeding costs rise. At times, corn prices have increased by more than 30 to 40%, driving up feed costs significantly. Producers cannot absorb all of that cost. They reduce herds or raise prices, and in the end, what you see is not a shortage of corn. You see meat becoming more expensive, eggs becoming more expensive, milk becoming more expensive. But this is what makes it more dangerous. Corn is not only in feed, it also appears in corn syrup, processed foods, ethanol fuel, and even parts of production systems you do not notice. Corn is not in one place. It is everywhere. And when something that exists everywhere begins to shift, you do not know where it starts. When meat prices rise, you think it is about meat. When egg prices rise, you think it is about eggs. But sometimes, the cause begins with something you never see. In the past, people grew corn to feed themselves. Today, corn feeds an entire system you depend on every day. And when the underlying input is affected, you do not see a shortage immediately. You just see everything becoming more expensive. Corn does not disappear from the shelf. It disappears from the system's ability to keep prices stable. You do not see a shortage of corn. You see your entire food world starting to change. 5. Cooking oil. It is not that oil is scarce. It is that the substitution system is overloaded. You think if one type of oil is missing, you can switch to another. But what is happening now is, there is no longer another option as easily as before. In a short period, global cooking oil prices have at times increased by more than 40 to 60%. Not because one type failed, but because many types faced problems at the same time. Sunflower oil depends heavily on Russia and Ukraine. Palm oil is concentrated in Indonesia and Malaysia. Olive oil depends on the Mediterranean climate. This is the key point. Cooking oil supply is not widely distributed. It is concentrated in a few major regions. When one region faces disruption, war, drought, or export policy changes, the entire market is affected immediately. But what makes it more serious is how the market reacts. When sunflower oil is limited, people switch to palm oil. When palm oil prices rise, they switch to soybean oil. And when all are under pressure, there is nothing left to switch to. This is the domino effect. Not individual shortages, but the entire substitution system being stretched at once. You do not see empty shelves. You see fewer choices. You do not lack oil. You lose the ability to choose how you cook as before. One person said it clearly. I do not remember the last time I bought oil without checking the price. Before, you chose by habit. Now you choose from what remains. What few people mention is that cooking oil is not just an ingredient. Each type has its own role: frying, sautéing, dressing, flavoring. When you switch oils, you are not just changing an ingredient, you are changing how you cook without realizing it. A more practical approach is not to rely on a single type. Use multiple oils in smaller quantities to avoid spoilage and maintain flexibility when prices shift. And then you realize something. The issue is not whether oil is available, but whether you still have the ability to substitute. Because when all options begin to disappear at once, substitution is no longer an option. If tomorrow you cannot find your usual oil, Will you switch easily or realize that flexibility in your kitchen was something you never thought you could lose? 4. Wheat and bread. It is not just bread. It is what has kept humans stable for thousands of years in history. When wheat becomes unstable, society follows. In 2008, a sharp rise in wheat prices led to waves of food protests in many countries. Not because bread disappeared overnight, but because the cost of the most basic staple began to exceed what people could afford. Wheat was not always a convenient food as you see today. In ancient Egypt, workers were paid in wheat. They stored the grain, milled it when needed, and created their own meals. Wheat was not just food, it was stability. Today, you do not see wheat. You see the final products: bread, pasta, cereals, crackers. But behind all of them is still one single raw material, and that raw material is under real pressure. Ukraine and Russia once accounted for about 25 to 30% of global wheat exports. When that flow was disrupted, the market did not collapse. It shifted. At times, wheat prices increased by more than 40 to 50%, driving up the cost of many foods you would not think are connected. But the key point is not the number. It is time. Wheat requires seasons, land, water. When fertilizer prices rise, when fuel costs increase, when weather patterns shift, supply cannot recover quickly. It weakens gradually, and when the foundation weakens, the entire structure above it begins to change. In the past, people stored grain to maintain control. Today, you buy finished products and depend on the system. When you no longer have direct access to the raw material, you will not notice when it starts to change. When wheat becomes unstable, it is not just bread. The entire food system is affected, because this is the base ingredient feeding everything behind it. Keep a supply of flour or dry wheat grain, stored sealed, protected from light, and rotated regularly. Because in a changing market, what helps you stay in control is not quantity, but your ability to control the source. 3. Leafy greens. It is not that vegetables are scarce. It is that stability disappears week by week. This week, the shelves are full. Next week, they are empty. No warning, no clear reason. You just return and see everything has changed. Lettuce, greens, salad, the simplest items, are also the most sensitive. They do not store well. Just a few days of heat, untimely rain, or a crop disease, and an entire harvest can be lost. Most leafy greens depend on a primary region, such as California. When weather shifts there, the effect happens almost immediately. Enough today, shortage next week. No transition period. At times, lettuce prices have increased more than 20 to 30% within just a few weeks. Not because demand rose, but because supply fluctuated too quickly to adjust. This is not a long-term shortage. It is instability. You do not know what will be on the shelf next week. You do not know what the price will be. And you begin to realize, planning meals is no longer as simple as before. What few people say is, leafy greens do not disappear, but your ability to predict them does. And when something is no longer stable, you cannot depend on it the same way. One person said it honestly, "I do not want to guess whether there will be vegetables next week. I started growing my own." You do not need a large garden. Just a few simple things like lettuce, green onions, microgreens, fast-growing, quick to harvest, and less dependent on the supply chain. When something changes week by week, will you keep depending on it or start creating your own stability? 2. Rice. It is not just rice. It is an early signal of the entire market when rice begins to shift. the market usually follows. It sounds big, but history has repeated it many times. Whenever rice prices rise sharply, food inflation spreads afterward. Rice appears stable because it is always available, and its price usually does not spike as dramatically as other items. But precisely because of that, when rice changes, it is no longer a small fluctuation. It is a signal. The cause is not a single factor. El Niño disrupts rainfall cycles in Asia, the region producing most of the world's rice. Prolonged heat reduces yield. Unstable irrigation leads to lower output than expected. At the same time, rising fertilizer and fuel costs prevent farmers from expanding production quickly. But the strongest factor is policy. When supply tightens, many major exporting countries impose restrictions or controls to protect domestic markets. And it only takes a few major countries to do that, for the rest of the world to feel it immediately. At times, global rice prices have risen more than 30 to 40% in a short period. Not because demand surged, but because trade flows were restricted. Someone at a supermarket described it simply. Before, I would just pick up a familiar bag of rice and leave. But the last time, I paused. Not because it was gone, but because too many things had changed at once. Different prices, different brands, and I was no longer sure I was choosing the same as before. This is what makes rice different. It is not just food, it is the staple for billions of people. When it shifts, the market reaction is no longer normal. It spreads. You do not need to live in a place with rice shortages to be affected. As soon as global supply tightens, domestic prices respond as well. A more practical approach is not to buy only when needed. Store rice properly, dry, sealed, away from light, and rotate it regularly to maintain quality. You do not need to stockpile excessively, just enough to avoid being caught off guard when prices shift. When the most stable item begins to change, everything else will not remain stable. If one day rice prices start rising quickly, will you see it as an isolated event or the first signal of a much larger chain of changes? 1. Beef. It is not about scarcity. It is about losing the ability to return to what it used to be. Beef prices have at times risen sharply, but what is more concerning is that the total cattle herd in the United States has fallen to its lowest level in many years. Prolonged drought in Texas and other major livestock states has depleted pasture, reduced water supply, and driven feed costs higher. Ranchers have no choice. They are forced to reduce herds, not because they want to, but because they can no longer sustain them. And this is what makes beef completely different. Once the herd is reduced, you cannot restart it in a few months like other foods. A single cow takes 18 to 24 months to raise before reaching the market. That means what is happening today will directly affect your supply for the next 2 to 3 years. Beef does not disappear, but its ability to recover nearly disappears in the short term. You still see meat on the shelf, but if you look closely, you will notice that choice changes before quantity disappears. The cut you usually buy may cost more, or disappear, or be replaced with something unfamiliar. You do not lose beef immediately. You lose the ability to choose how you eat in the way you have known for years, and that is what makes it dangerous. For many people, especially those used to cooking with stable routines, beef is not just food. It is part of a family meal, part of the feeling of completeness. When prices rise and choices shrink, you are not just adjusting spending. You are quietly changing your way of living without realizing it. One person said it honestly, "I still buy beef, but not the same way as before. I have to think whether it is worth it today." That is not a shortage. That is a shift in how you make decisions. If you want to stay in control, you do not need to stockpile excessively, but you need to change your approach. Instead of buying meal by meal, consider purchasing larger portions when prices are reasonable, dividing them into servings and freezing immediately to preserve quality. Cuts like ground beef, chuck, or less popular portions tend to have more stable pricing and greater flexibility in cooking. A simple tip many overlook: rotate how you use meat instead of relying on one familiar style. Combining beef with beans, vegetables, or grains not only extends portions, but also maintains the structure of the meals you are used to, instead of creating a sense of lack. And most importantly, do not let beef be the only protein source in your mind. Not to replace it completely, but to ensure you always have options when something that used to be stable is no longer the same. Because in the end, the issue is not whether you can find beef or not. This is not a story about 12 items. It is a story about how the system is changing, quietly, gradually, but enough for you to feel it. There are no empty shelves, no panic. Just small decisions you begin to think about more carefully. What matters is not stockpiling as much as possible. It is understanding what is happening behind the scenes. When you understand the cause, you no longer react. You act proactively. You do not need to change your entire life. Just adjust a small part. Diversify your food sources. Maintain a reasonable level of reserves, and reduce dependence on things that once felt stable. Because in the end, the issue is not whether there is a shortage or not. It is whether you still have control over your choices or not.